Alright, time to get into some serious stuff. Endpoint security. This would be a beginning of the second volume of this cybersecurity course. While in the first one we focused on discussing hackers and vulnerabilities, as well as demonstrating some of the most common vulnerabilities and how to protect against them, in this volume we will be focusing on endpoint protection and operating system protection. But before we dive into this, let's first explain real quick what even is endpoint security. Well, its name might give us a hint. Essentially, it is security on the endpoints of the network. This means endpoint protection focuses on your devices that are connected to the internet. This can be any device from your laptop, your PC, to your mobile phone or an iPad, and all of these are considered an endpoint devices, and we will focus on different methods and different things to keep an eye on when trying to secure these type of devices. Here is a list of some of the things that we will talk about that are important when it comes to endpoint protection. We will talk about browsers, antiviruses, passwords, file and folder protection, host firewalls, and more things besides this. We will dive deep into details for each of these topics, and we will discuss which methods can be used to make them as hardened as possible. All of these will play a key role to making our device more secure and resistant to outside threats. So without further ado, let's get straight into talking about browsers and how to increase their protection. Okay, let's dive into browsers and their protection. Now, before we even start, you might wonder, why is this the first thing that we talk about in the endpoint security volume? Well, realistically, most of the attacks happen over websites which you visit with the help of your browser. And when you think about it, most of your activity on your laptop or on your personal computer is usually over browser, just browsing through different pages and websites. So this is one of the target spots for black hat hackers when it comes to compromising your device or your data, and it is very important in the endpoint protection. We even talked about phishing attacks before. Well, how do you load that phishing page? Through your browser. And that is just one of the things that can happen when you are on the internet. Imagine an attacker hosting a malicious website that once visited can exploit a bug inside the browser that's outdated. And in case you are running an outdated version of some browser and you end up visiting that website, the attacker can end up stealing your data, or in worst case scenario, depending on the vulnerability, they can even run remote code execution on your PC. And all of that just because you haven't patched a certain vulnerability. This is why it's always important to update your browser on a regular basis, especially if you're the type of person to browse random links on the internet. But this leads us to second question, and that is, are all browsers equally good? Are there some that are better than others, or are there some that we shouldn't be using at all? Well, as with everything else, yes, there is a difference. There are differences between all the browsers, and ideally, you don't want to be using Internet Explorer at all. Some browsers have better protection and update very fast. This is important because if the browser that you are using takes 2 weeks to update after discovery of certain vulnerability, that means you will be vulnerable to that attack for 2 weeks, even though you have automatic updates on and will run it as soon as the update is available. If some other browser takes 4 hours to update after discovering a critical vulnerability, well, then it's probably a better choice to go with that one if you're comparing 4 hours to 2 weeks, since that is a big difference. And 2 weeks time in cybersecurity is a lot. Sometimes even having an outdated browser can pose a risk, even if you're not using it at all. Okay, so here are the things that we will focus on when discussing certain browsers. We will mostly talk about security settings of that browser as well as the privacy settings. We will also mention the availability of extensions and the protection against client-side injection attacks. And as we mentioned, we will also talk about the update time when it comes to vulnerabilities. Let's dive straight into it. Hello and welcome back. In this video, we're going to be focusing on security and hardening of Firefox. Now, Firefox is one of the most commonly used browsers, so we're going to start with that one first. If you have Firefox, open it up, and it will open whichever search engine that you have. And the first thing that we want to do is we want to navigate to these three lines right here, and we want to select Preferences. This will open the Firefox settings menu. Let me just enlarge this real quick so we can see everything a little bit better. And here we will have 5 different options to choose from in this settings menu. We have General, Home, Search, Privacy and Security, and Sync options. We want to go to Privacy and Security first. Let's go through all of the options right here. So here we have Enhanced Tracking Protection. Usually, when you open your Firefox and you haven't messed with the settings yet, this will be set to standard. It won't be set to strict or to custom. And the standard option simply just, as it says right here, gives you balanced protection and performance. Pages will load normally. Now, this is important, and I will mention in just a second why this sentence is written right here, that pages will load normally. And we can see right here what the standard settings blocks. It blocks social media trackers, cross-site tracking cookies, tracking content in private windows, crypto miners, and fingerprinters. Every time you change a certain setting, it will ask you to restart Firefox in order for it to take action. Ideally, for more security, you want to have strict instead of standard. Now, you will notice that strict looks quite similar. It says stronger protection, but may cause some sites or content to break. This is because it has a stronger protection and it blocks cookies more than the standard option. And some of those cookies can be essential for loading up the page, and that's why here it says that some websites or some content might break due to the blocked cookies. We see right here that it also blocks social media trackers, cross-site tracking cookies, tracking content in all windows, and this is the setting that differentiates the standard from strict. While the standard blocks in private windows, the strict one blocks all the tracking content in all windows. And it also blocks crypto miners and fingerprinters. As it says right here, we get a heads up. Blocking trackers and isolating cookies could impact the functionality of some sites. Reload a page with trackers to load all content. So what you want is ideally to have strict ones set, and every time you can't load a page that you do trust, you can change it to standard and load it like that. Or if you want, you can also set the custom options. Now, custom options allows you to select what you want to block and what you don't want to block. Under the cookies, you want to have it checked, and ideally you want to have all third-party cookies blocked. It says this may cause some websites to break, but it will give you more security than any other option. Of course, if you remove the all cookies option, which will cause most of the websites to break, since most of the websites do need cookies in order to function. But all third-party cookies, you can have it like that, and if you can't load some website, once again, you can come back and change the settings for a website that you trust. You can prevent the tracking content in all windows is a better option than in only in private window, which is selected by default, and you want to select both crypto miners and fingerprinters. Once again, we get the warning that this might cause some websites to break, and to take action on this, we want to reload all the tabs. Okay, once you set that up, you want to scroll down. The next setting that we have is send websites a DNT signal that you don't want to be tracked. Now, you ideally want to have this set to always, but the website that wants to track you will track you nonetheless, since this is just a part of the HTTP request that you send to that website, which has this do not track flag. If the website wants to ignore it, they can ignore it, but you want to have it always set on. Cookies and site data, it's good to always clear this data on a regular basis, every time that you can. Under that, we have logins and passwords, and here you don't want to have passwords saved. It's always a better option to use something like a password manager than to have passwords saved inside of your browser. And password managers are something that we will talk about later in this section, but it's something similar as this option right here, use master password. If you check about what the master password is, it is essentially a password that will unlock all the saved credentials inside of Firefox. So pretty much if you lose this password, you won't be able to log in anywhere in case you don't remember the exact password. So you want to have this turned off, and as an ideal security settings, we will show how to use password manager instead of this. But more about that later. As far as history goes, you want to have it to never remember history. Instead of always remember history, it will ask you to restart Firefox, and you should do that, but I'm just going to click cancel right here because I don't want to have it restarted right now. And clearing history is always a good option to do after you change these settings to never remember history. The next important thing are permissions. So here you can take a look at different types of permissions that Firefox will request from you depending on the website that you visit. For example, if you want only certain websites to have access to your location, you can add them right here, and as a security measure, you can block all new requests asking to access your location. This will only allow the currently specified websites right here, which in my case are none, to access your location, and all the other websites won't be able to access it. You can just click on Save Changes, and now you have this security measure checked. Okay, you can do that for each and every one of these, for camera, for microphone, for notifications, whatever you want. You want to have these options checked, block pop-up windows, warn you when websites try to install add-ons. It's always good to have warnings when something that could be malicious is taking place, so always make sure to have these checked. And let's go all the way down. Firefox data collection and use. This is depending on your privacy policy. You either want or don't want to have this checked. It's completely up to you. Now we come to security settings, which pretty much you want to have most of these checked. You want to block dangerous and deceptive content. You want to block dangerous downloads. You want Firefox to warn you about unwanted and uncommon software. And that's pretty much about it when it comes to the default Firefox security. But besides that, if you want to take some additional measures, you want to install some extensions that will enhance your security and harden the Firefox. You can do that by installing an extension called NoScript, which, as it says right here, it's the best security you can get in a web browser. It will only allow the JavaScript or potentially malicious web content to run on the websites that you trust. This will protect you against certain attacks such as cross-site scripting attacks, which is essentially running malicious JavaScript code inside of your browser. You can read more about this extension right here, and if you decide that this one is of a good use to you, you can add it to your Firefox. Same goes with this extension right here, HTTPS everywhere. This is also important because it will not allow you to browse through HTTP pages. It will always try to upgrade it to HTTPS. This is good because HTTPS is encrypted and nobody can sniff your data if they perform something like a man-in-the-middle attack. And last but not least, we have the DuckDuckGo Privacy Essentials. This will essentially make DuckDuckGo, which is a private search engine, to be your default search engine for Firefox. This will allow you to have private search, smarter encryption, as it says right here, tracker blocking as well, and many more things. If you want to read more about it, you can take a look at this description right here. and if you decide that it's good for you, add it to Firefox. Okay, so this was about Firefox. We talked about different privacy and security settings, how to make it more secure, which extensions to install on making it even more secure than just with the default settings. And if you want to learn even more, I advise you to check this link, which talks about Firefox hardening guide. Let me just zoom this in, and you can go through this table of contents and check all these things out in order to make your Firefox even more secure. Nonetheless, that's about it for this video. I will leave the resources down below, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Welcome back. In this video, we will talk about Brave browser. Now, many people don't know about Brave browser. They either use Chrome or Firefox. But Brave browser is one of the greatest browsers when it comes to security and privacy. And in this video, we're going to take a look at why is that. Okay, so first of all, if you're interested, you can download Brave browser from brave.com/download. It will have this download button, and you will be able to download this browser if that's what you prefer after this video. Once you open it up, it looks something like this. Now, you will notice that this browser is quite similar to Firefox, but it does have some different features and some more advanced features when it comes to security and privacy settings. So, once you have it set up, in order to make it even more secure than it already is, you want to navigate once again to the settings, which are right here, and it will open this rather large menu. So first setting that we are interested in when it comes to security is shields. So navigate right to the shields, and we will have this window right here. Block trackers and ads which follow you across the web. Now you can either have the simple view or advanced view, and what this is referring to is this icon right here. So every time you visit a website, you can click on this icon and see how many ads and trackers have you blocked. For example, let's set the shield up first to be just the standard options, so tracks ads blocking standard, upgrade to HTTPS, let's leave it like that. We do not want to block scripts, and cookie blocking, let's leave it to only cross-site. Fingerprinting blocking will also be left on standard. Now, these are not the most secure settings, but let's just take a look at what happens once we, for example, visit facebook.com. Okay, so it loaded the page normally, and if we click right here, it will tell us 0 items blocked and connection upgraded. But now let's try to change some settings a little bit. Tracker and ads blocking to the aggressive. We want to block scripts, and we will leave only cross-site. Standard, we can set to strict, which says may break websites. Now, these are far more secure settings, but if we load this, it should still work. But this time you will see that this icon says number 5. Currently we have 5 items blocked, and we can take a look at which items that are. In this particular case, it is 5 blocked scripts. So if you leave this turned on, it will block each script that loads from the website, and you will also see the difference in the actual domain link, facebook.com, and we have Facebook_no_script equals 1. Now, it worked and it managed to load this website, but what would happen if we try some other website? For example, let's go to cnn.com. With these current settings, the cnn.com looks like this, which doesn't look anything close to the real website. We don't have images, we don't have news, we don't have anything. This is because it blocked many things. We got tracker blocked, since it is turned to aggressive. We got 10 scripts blocked, and if we want to load the website, we can turn this to standard. We can turn off the scripts blocking, and now look at this. Now it fully loads the website. It does, however, still manage to block 40 different trackers, even on standard settings. How cool is that? So if you do not trust some website, I do advise you to have this on aggressive and to have scripts blocked, since this really prevents many attacks. But on the websites that you do trust, if you don't manage to load them, like we can't load this website, just go right here and turn off the scripts that are being blocked. And also make sure this is on standard. Once you refresh the page, it will work normally. Okay, so that is shield settings. Once again, simple menu right here. Choose whichever settings you want. These would be most secure. Of course, you can always set block all cookies, but this will probably break 90% of websites there are. So you don't really want to overdo the security, since you won't really be able to use the browse feature anymore. You can access the shield by this icon and control it from there if you want to. And let's move on to the next settings, which would be social media blocking. So here, this is pretty much up to you. Do you want to allow Google login buttons on third-party websites? Do you want to allow Facebook and Twitter logins and embedded posts in different websites? That's completely up to you. Of course, the more secure version would be to have this turned off, but it won't make much of a difference when it comes to security, but it will make a little bit difference when it comes to privacy. Talking about privacy, let's move on to the security and privacy settings. And you will notice that there are a little bit more settings when it comes to security and privacy compared to Firefox or any other browser. We have autocomplete searches and URLs. This is completely up to you whether you want to have it turned off or on. We have WebRTC IP handling policy, and WebRTC is simply just for phone calls and video calls. For now, you want to leave it on default. And let's go down to these important settings, which are clear browsing data. If we click on that, you can clear all the browsing data. So this is standard settings in every browser. Just by clicking clear data, it will clear everything from history to cookies to stored cache. Below that, we have cookies and other site data. And here you can pretty much set the security and privacy measures for cookies. I advise you to have this at block third-party cookies, since this one is not recommended, since I already told you it will break some websites. This is good one to have. Clear cookies and site data when you close all windows, so every time you close Brave browser, it will clear all the cookies and site data, so nothing will be stored on your machine. We also want send a do not track request, and it does have some definition of it right here. We want to confirm this. See all cookies and data, not really interested in that anymore. And you can put a whitelist right here, sites that can always use cookies. So the sites that you trust, you can set them right here. And you can also create a blacklist, which are sites that can never use cookies. And let's go to the security settings. Here we have standard protection and no protection. Of course, I recommend having standard protection turned on. And in the advanced settings, you want to always use secure connections, which means it will upgrade to HTTPS. Make sure this is on. And manage security keys, manage certificates. Nothing really of interest to us for now. Let's go back to see if there is anything else. We do got site and shield settings, but these settings are similar to these ones that we covered in the shield part of the menu. But here you can also set permissions similarly to the Firefox permissions that we talked about. You can choose which websites will have access to your location, camera, microphone, and notifications. And you can also check additional permissions if you want. We got the content. Don't allow sites to use JavaScript. This will block the scripts, which may crash some websites. But once again, you can create the blacklist and whitelist to choose which websites can or cannot run scripts in your browser. Third-party cookies, we already talked about that. You can choose which websites can show you images and which websites can create pop-ups and redirects. If you want to check more, click on additional settings and you will have even more things to choose from. Now, creating a whitelist is a good solution once you only visit certain websites. You don't want some random website that you know nothing about to create pop-ups, to download files for you, or to run any JavaScript code in your browser. Next thing that we have is search engine. And currently I have it set to DuckDuckGo, but you will most likely either have it to Google or Brave. I do recommend changing it, and DuckDuckGo is pretty good option to choose. So this is once again completely up to you, but I would go with DuckDuckGo. You can manage search engines right here, and this would be pretty much all about Brave. You can also check some additional settings if you're interested, but we will not be talking about those right now. One more thing that you want to check out are the extensions. Here are the settings for the extensions. You can manage them. You can hide your IP address with private windows with Tor, and Tor is something that we will cover later in the course. Nonetheless, feel free to check out all the other settings if you wish. We talked about some of the most important settings when it comes to Brave browser security and privacy, but feel free to explore even more, and if you like this browser, feel free to use it instead of Firefox or Chrome. Nonetheless, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lecture. Welcome back. Before we proceed to talking about antiviruses, I just want to leave some resource for browser hardening for the browsers that we didn't cover, such as Safari or Google Chrome. Now, we're not going to go through all of them, and the reason is because most of them have similar settings, and we did cover what is important and what's not so important. So here we have Apple Safari Security and Privacy Guide for 2022, and it will lead you through the table of contents about everything that you should set up when it comes to Safari, security and privacy. Just click on each and every one of them and figure out what would be the best settings for configuring this browser. It talks about security, privacy, talks about filtering different websites and giving different permissions to different websites, everything that we already covered. It also talks about extensions and all of that. It has similar settings to what we covered for the Brave browser and the Firefox, but this is strictly for Safari. Another thing, and another browser that most of you probably used, is Chrome browser. And here is a good resource or a good PDF file that you can download from the Google themselves to configure the Chrome browser for the best possible security and privacy. Now, one thing to mention is that if you care about privacy, you ideally don't want to use Chrome, even with their specified settings, because it's from Google, and Google's main business is to not really care about your privacy and throw you ads and all of that. So when it comes to privacy, Google Chrome might not be the best option. However, security-wise, they're really, really good. Besides just configuring the default settings, you can also take a look at some of the different extensions, such as uBlock Origin, which, as it says right here, is free and open source ad content blocker. And if you even want more security, you can always add some additional layers, such as, for example, browsing the internet through a virtual machine. That way, even if your machine gets compromised through the browser, it will still be a virtual machine, so the attacker will also have to escape your virtual machine to attack the host machine. Now, for regular people, those type of measures are not really needed because they are too extreme, but if you really, really care about privacy, it is one layer of security that will definitely help. Nonetheless, thank you for watching, and let's move on to the next part, which is talking about antiviruses. Okay, important topic and something that is familiar to all of you is antiviruses. In security, antiviruses are one of the most important things, and quite frankly, most people disagree on the usage of antiviruses. Some say it's needed, some say that if you know what you're doing on the internet, you don't need an antivirus. While there is no good answer to this, it is a fact that antiviruses do protect against some threats. It is also a fact that malware and antivirus are a game of a cat and mouse. Hackers find a way to make an undetectable payload, and few weeks after, antivirus vendors update their software to detect that specific payload. And this has been a game for years. Now, I want to introduce you to another term in cybersecurity which is important nowadays and it can be confused with antivirus. That is EDR, or Endpoint Detection and Response. Antiviruses can usually be a part of a larger EDR system. Bigger companies and people that want increased security also have endpoint detection and prevention systems as a layer of protection against malware. EDR can be described as a layer of protection that constantly monitors and collects data that might indicate a threat on an endpoint device. They do this by analyzing the data for specific patterns that will indicate a possible threat. And they also provide a possible solution or response to a threat once it's being detected. They can choose to remove it, quarantine it, or temporarily stop and disable it. Now, you might confuse this with antivirus, and that is because most of the known antivirus vendors actually offer EDR as well. Just remember two important things. Antivirus is there to protect, and EDR is there to detect and respond. Now, another important thing when it comes to threats and antiviruses is that we always think of malware when someone says threat. Malware are just a small portion of possible threat or attack vectors when it comes to endpoint security. Remember that people using the endpoint device can also be targeted with something like a phishing attack, where they will be asked to input their credentials. Security vendors are also thinking of this, and that is why many antivirus and EDR will actually offer a protection against phishing attacks. Besides that, some advanced antivirus software will also perform code analysis when it comes to unknown executable that might be a threat. There could be something like a code injection or shellcode being injected somewhere. It's not always a standalone malware that will be the problem. Security vendors think about all of this, and while 100% protection doesn't exist, these EDR and antivirus softwares do protect against certain things. However, there is a bad side to this, and that is privacy when it comes to having these softwares installed. But that is a topic for later in the course. For now, we will focus only on the security aspect, and we can think of it like this. We have antivirus at the first line of defense when it comes to a malware that is already on our system, and we have EDR at the second line of the defense. This is because maybe antivirus won't be able to protect against a particular threat, but the EDR might be able to detect it and respond to it properly. This, of course, creates a problem where the malware, if it's advanced one, can try to disable all of the security measures and continue executing and performing its malicious activity. There are multiple ways that advanced antiviruses can detect or prevent the malware, and here are some of them. We have the oldest way of signature-based detection, where antivirus vendors have a large database with all the known malware signatures. And if the antivirus recognizes these signatures in some program, it will block them and flag them as malicious. This is of course not enough, since attackers can just change or alter the code of malware a little bit and create a completely different program with a different hashed signature. That's why we also have heuristic analysis, which is designed to spot an unknown malware. It analyzes the code of the program, and with different rules set, it determines whether that program could be malicious or not. Another layer of protection that is added is something called sandbox detection. This simply refers to testing out malware and analyzing it in a safe and isolated environment to see the code's behavior without putting the host machines at the risk. Of course, all of this can be bypassed if attacker tests for heuristic analysis with different rules and manages to create a malware that is able to bypass all of them. And for sandbox detection, if the malware is, for example, being tested in a virtual environment, some malwares could be smart enough to detect that, in which case they won't execute. Attacker can just input in code of malicious program that if the program is ran from a virtual environment, it won't execute anything malicious. And another important thing when it comes to analyzing suspicious programs is to detect any type of weird behavior. if the malware tries accessing folder or files that it shouldn't, or if it tries copying itself to system locations on the machine, it can be stopped and detected as a malicious program, even though at the beginning it wasn't considered to be malicious. These are just some of the methods that today's antivirus vendors implement to try and fight against malware. Now, in the next lecture, we will mention what is the base antivirus software that we have in both Windows and Mac OS that we can use to the fullest without installing anything additionally. And after that, we'll talk about different antivirus vendors that you can download, whether it being the free product or whether it being the paid product, where we'll talk about the best ones out there that you can use to better up your security. See you in the next lecture. Alright, before we actually talk about different antiviruses that you can download and run, let's first talk about the default security measures in Windows and Mac OS. So in Windows, we already know there is the standard Windows Defender. And that is the Windows antivirus that will prevent malicious programs from executing or accessing your machine. Let's take a look at what are the best recommended settings to have when using just Windows Defender. So we already know, or most of us know, that when we want to run Windows Defender, we can click on this icon or this arrow right here, and the Windows security icon will appear. Once we click on that, it will open this Windows security window where we can take a look at different types of security measures that Windows Defender offers us. Of course, you can access this through the search bar as well, but this is the easier way for me. To take a look at the Windows Defender settings, we want to navigate to Windows, Virus and Threat Protection. And here we have a couple of different options. You will notice that this is a rather simple menu, so there is not really many things right here to choose from. Let's go to the Virus and Threat Protection settings, click on Manage Settings, and ideal settings that you want to have are real-time protection turned on. You also want to have cloud-delivered protection, automatic sample submission, you want to turn on, since it helps Windows Defender recognize malicious programs. And down here, you also want to have tamper protection turned on. As it says, the tamper protection prevents others from tampering with important security features, which is rather important since you don't want your malware to actually turn off the Windows Defender or any other security measures that you might have. And one of the settings that you also want to have set if you care about security on your machine is you want to have controlled folder access turned on. Now, this will cause some false positives since it will lock most important folders, and if we turn it on, it does require administrator privileges. Once you set it on, you can take a look at the protected folders, which will once again require administrator privileges, and currently these are the protected folders by default. You can add a protected folder right here, and any other application, whether malicious or not, might have problem and might cause a false positive when trying to access these folders. It can be a little bit annoying, but for more enhanced security, you do want to have this turned on. Besides that, you also want to have ransomware data recovery. You want to set up OneDrive. In case you get infected with a ransomware, you will have your files and folders in a backup drive where you can access them in case of a ransomware attack. And those are pretty much all the settings that you want to have set in the Windows Defender. You can always regularly check for updates by going to this Protection Updates and checking for updates by clicking on this button. We can see that the last update currently for me was on the 5th of February 2022. Okay, we're not going to wait for this. And one last thing that I want to show you before we move on to the Mac OS default security is I want to show you a useful security measure that you can set up by going to Control Panel, System and Security, then Security and Maintenance. If we click on this arrow, which will lower our current security settings, we will have User Account Control. And User Account Control, as it says, will notify you when apps try to make changes to the computer. If we click on change settings, it will require administrator privileges, and once you provide the administrator password, it will open this window, and there are 4 different options that you can choose from when setting the user account control. The default one will be set right here. Notify me only when apps try to make changes to my computer. Don't notify me when I make changes to Windows settings. If you want furthermore security, you want to put this to always notify. This will change it to always notify me when apps try to install software or make changes to my computer, and notify me when I make changes to Windows settings. This will once again give you a little bit more prompts when running different applications and installing different softwares, but for more security, you want to have this set to always notify me. When you click on OK, it asks for administrative password, click on yes, and you have it all set. Now, firewalls are something that we will talk about later on. For now on, we're only interested in the antivirus, and these are the recommended default settings when it comes to higher security on Windows machine. Nonetheless, this is about it for the default security settings, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at the same thing for macOS.